So hi everyone over here. Just for those that are wondering, we are using Shalini's LinkedIn to talk about Singularity University Gurgaon's session on essentially the topic that a lot of people have been asking us to talk about, which is just the future of what the consumer demand behavior is going to look like. What is the future of the consumer going to look like when a challenging ecosystem is around us? For many reasons whatsoever. So, as a lot of you would know, Shalini is one of the leadership members at Singularity University. Um, I have with me Ishaan Khosla, also a part of Singularity University's leadership. A co-founder of a partner of Huddle Accelerator, and we've got Ankit Mishra, who is the founder of Story Express. A lot about Story Express is relevant about today's session. Just before we play the role of three moderators for the next 25 to 30 minutes, I do want to talk about Singularity University. We stand for innovation, entrepreneurship, and all the terms that speak about the future. We stand for building actions towards a more sustainable ecosystem with the expertise of technology and the mindset of like-minded people. Being a part of the leadership, what we have learned is that you cannot do anything without being a part of a huddle, about being a part of the right people and teams around you. So with Ankit today and Ishaan, what we're going to do is get straight into it, talking about what the future of the consumer ecosystem looks like, what the demand for, how do you create demand in a challenging ecosystem. So with that, Ankit, I'd actually like to start with you. I'd like, while it'll be great if you can give us a quick background on what Story Express is in terms of how you built it and how is it relatable to the subject we're talking about today.
Okay, sure. So I think just to begin with, at Story Express, we are building a video platform for enterprises. So right now, if you look at the kind of environment we are in, people are moving to a remote work environment and so on and so forth. And you have to reach out to, so earlier, maybe you were using videos only for marketing, but now even for sales, even for team communication, everything is moving towards videos. So so one part is like how do we enable all these functions within an organization? So like how companies can use videos for internal communication, how they can use it for sales, how they can use it for marketing. So so that's the problem we are trying to solve, and to solve that, we are building a one-stop solution. I mean, like there can't be a one-stop solution, but like we are trying to move in that direction. So we have a few different products. So one of the product which we started with is a video creation platform where you can create videos with existing content, and that could be used for creating marketing content. Then we have a tool which allows you to record videos. So and again, like our focus has been on asynchronous communication. So rather than getting on a Zoom call every time you want to explain something, you can record a quick video and capture your screen and send it to a teammate or a prospect and so on. So so that tool you can actually use for your internal team communication and for sales or for customer support. Now those are the two ways like we are enabling the content creation. Now once this content has been created, this has to sit somewhere. So we have created a video hosting infrastructure as well, so which would be more like a private YouTube or a Dropbox or box for the videos. So you can actually define who can watch that video content, and you can define if you want to share it with a marketing team or a sales team or with the entire organization. And if you are sending it to an external viewer, you can either make it a public, or you can define a password, or you can just share it through an email ID. Now, with the video content, what happens is, like, obviously, even though we have created these tools, we are sort of making it easier for you to create content, but even then it takes a significant amount of time to create that content. So how do you ensure that whatever you are creating and you are spending time and efforts in, if that is making an impact? So that we sort of define by tracking like all the analytics on top of that. So on the platform, you can actually see how many people are watching your video, where they are dropping, and based on that, you can either optimize that content, or maybe like you can poke that person that I've sent you a video and you haven't watched it, like watch it, and maybe you just watch the 30% of the video, 50% of the video, but like the main crux was at the end. So you can ensure all of that. So yeah, I think we are trying to build a platform for enterprises to make most out of their video efforts. And we have customers like ranging from Fortune 500 companies to SMBs to like individual users. And as of today, like we have more than 100,000 users on the platform, and maybe a few thousand paid customers.
Great. So, Ankit, you brought up a very interesting point that I wanted to direct to Ishaan as well. That you build products a bit in some of your products were built preempting what your customer would want. Some were built keeping in mind the customer's pulse, and you started adapting, from the internal workflow to the external workflow. So, just with the transition of how you're building Story Express for clients, globally, I want to actually, redirect this to Ishaan and, ask you that, Ishaan, as an accelerator, you're building B2B and B2C ventures. You're building ventures across scale, across different intents. So what mindset are you a part of? Are you a part of the mindset that says, let's build the product, find the customer, or let's find the customer and then build the product? And could you give instances of how you probably have done both, or whichever one you're more in favor of?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a very relevant question for any founder and any company to sort of try and tackle and reach a conclusion toward the earliest. I think it's also a very hard question to sort of answer. In an idealistic sort of world, obviously reaching that end customer and identifying that target audience at the earliest is always the goal for any company, any team. And I think in certain businesses wherein, if I had to talk about, for instance, consumer brands, right, direct to consumer brands, and we're talking about slightly more crowded areas and segments, it's very, very important to spend active time and efforts to identify that customer very, very early on, and then take a very targeted approach to be able to build products, services around that customer in order for us to be relevant, right? But if we talk about industries wherein we're taking a slightly more futuristic sort of element. So if you look at electric vehicles, for instance, it's very hard for us to be able to identify and pinpoint every single customer and build around that customer, because there's heavy experimentation and R&D that needs to go behind each of the scenarios to be able to configure that out. So there it's more of identify use cases, identify a broad sort of target audience, and then continue to keep narrowing down in terms of focus as you build the product and service specifically for that audience.
So then, there are obviously a bunch of fundamental principles that go into identifying what learning to use where and when. I think, what my takeaway from that essentially is that, I think what we've learned about the startup ecosystem or any ecosystem is that there's cookie cutter models can only last a batch, and you have to keep reinventing the wheel in essence. So with that, Ankit, when you built an organization that had, if I'm not incorrect, had a B2C, then going B2B, and then you went B2B2C, and you've also gone B2B2B. So you've almost done all the life cycle of how technology can be optimized. And I think with that, regardless of whichever transition you took, rather than why you took it, I would love to know the fundamental principles or the fundamental principle that did change, and those just haven't changed regardless of all your transitions.
Okay. Yeah. So I think just to continue what Ishaan was mentioning. So I sort of feel that like every founder and the team, right? So they sort of bring in like their personal experiences, and like obviously you try to sort of remove the biases when you are maybe building product or something. But then how you have how your conditioning has been, or how you have thought about like what's your worldview. So somewhere that sort of comes into the picture. So like I personally feel like if you give like exact problem statement to two or three different founders, like they might start with something very very similar, but then how they evolve like 2 years down the line, that might be very very different, right? And that can be because of their past experiences, or maybe like some founders take data driven decisions versus some founders take a decision based on gut. So I think that somehow changes your entire trajectory. uh, and so I think for us, I think whenever we took any decision, right? So I think uh, like I personally like believe in gut, but then like after reading and like I have team members, my co-founder, and like other people in the team. So a lot of time, like I know that this decision has to be made based on the data. So I think that's been a very good. I mean, that's where I think like we have been able to build products successfully, because like we are able to marry the data with the gut. Because at times when you just like look at the data, that might give a very skewed picture. So I'll just give you a very simple example. So and because so like what's happening with us right now. So like we have like this bigger market, but then on day one you decide to uh, choose like a one particular segment that you want to cater to. And especially when I talk about B2B businesses, like either they start with enterprise platform, and then probably when that gets saturated, a lot of companies start moving to mid market and the SMB, versus some companies start with SMB and then they try to go up market to maybe and maybe and so again like for everyone it's like grass is always greener on the other side. So like people who start with enterprise, they feel like SMB is much easier to capture, and there is a maybe fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, if I have to say that, right? Versus for other people, they think in a other direction. So now with that, what happens is uh, essentially so I mean now like let's say if we picked up SMB as a market, and maybe like we take decisions based on that particular segment, right? uh, then that data might be very very polluted, right? So for example, let's say I was reading this article yesterday itself. Like in the B2C, like your daily active users and monthly active users are like the metrics that you would want to track. And like if your daily active users versus monthly active user, that ratio is more than 50%, that is like Facebook level engagement. Now in the B2B SaaS, like people have started tracking similar kind of metrics. Now in most of the products which are like a freemium products, because of the free user, that data might get very very polluted, right? So you actually have to track how that engagement is within your paid customers, and not like maybe your free users. So at times, like when we are looking at the data, like we might not look at it from the holistic point of view. And that is where I feel the gut comes into the picture. So I think just to go back to your original questions, I think like one thing that has been constant in our journey is like focus on the speed. So whatever we try to ship, like we try to ship it very very quickly. And take a balanced decision between data and gut, and like be able to like zoom out and see where data is more meaningful, and maybe where the gut, or maybe like the direct feedback that might come from like two people, and we build product according to that. So yeah.
Okay, and I think you sort of ended that on a very interesting note that the difference between data and gut. And I think what Madhav has rightly pointed is, it's, I think the conviction of the founder then plays a major role maybe in both. Which one do you focus on the more? Is it the data? Is it the gut? We know that gut always um, comes in first. It also sets in last in many a case. So with that actually, Ishaan, when you're looking at ventures, both at the process you're scaling them, and then you have scaled them, I think scale is a subjective word. um, what's been your guidance to, and what will be your guidance in a challenging market? Would you rather, and the quick answer that I'd like to know is, would you rather have someone build for one customer 10 products, or would you rather have four customers served with three different products? Which one is more down your alley, and which one is right?
I think this is again one of those tricky sort of questions, and we always end up having a lot of debates with founders about this. But I think at an early stage, I think definitely more products to one single user, right? I think the more tailored approach that you can have to be able to target and address one single user base, I think that will definitely yield much better results. But at a time when one has conviction and the team has conviction about building for that particular user base, then of course, sort of expanding that product category to multiple different segments can always be a good way to be able to increase, the lifetime value of that customer, and that should be always be the game. But till one reaches that point of pinpointing and identifying to say that yes, this is the audience that we're going after. We know exactly how they're behaving. We know exactly what we need to do to be able to address them. I think that should be the approach. So I think that's what we fundamentally stick to. At least what I fundamentally stick to, and that's what we end up sort of grilling down across multiple different sessions with founders.
Okay. No, I hear you. It comes straight out of the boardroom. So I will agree on that. But okay, my last question to the two of you, and right after this, just with how we like to run our themes, one person can't play throw questions all the time. So just my last question to both of you, and then I'll pass it over to Ankit to grill us, ask us the questions. Is in one word, do you feel, and Ankit, you can go first, do you feel consumers in the challenging environment are going to be persuaded towards what they want to buy, what they want to purchase and spend their time in, due to FOMO or due to fear? And then Ishaan, it's over to you after Ankit.
I think the way currently our habits are, I think it would be because of FOMO.
And Ishaan?
I think I'll go the opposite and talk about fear as a need to drive consumer behavior.
Interesting. I'm really
What
glad
about you,
we've got.
Sanil?
I'm building the product that you both will buy. What do you want about? So, I'm going to. I think it's fair. It's fair for the short run, and it's going to turn into FOMO at scale. So I'm playing. I'll drop the coin in the middle. So Ankit, it's over to you.
Sure. So I think like I'll pick the gut versus data again. So now like as a founder, we are breathing, eating, sleeping about the startup and maybe that particular industry all the time. So basically like one, we have a lot of first hand data and the conviction either by talking to like a lot of customers and probably just by reading up, and sometimes that counts as daydreaming as well. So now when founders approach you as an investor, and which do you rely on? Because like you could get the data, and in some cases that data is also secondhand, right? You are not like getting that data firsthand. And even on the gut and like probably you haven't sort of lived the problem firsthand as well. So how do you go about building that conviction about a particular industry or about a particular idea? And yeah, so which one do you prefer? And like the follow-on question would be, any particular instance that like you could share where you like sort of went opposite to what you usually do, and that sort of became uh, and that you can share like a success story probably. So yeah.
I'll probably save the success story for Ishaan to talk to pick from, if that's all right. I think the easier question is the first one. So I'm going to put my hand up. I think I feel we rely on data, but we rely on building first-hand data. How we do that as a process is we always believe that you can only follow the gut of the founder. You cannot follow your gut on a founder. But therefore, you have to have the entire landscape of where their consumer is going to be, whether their consumer is a corporation, if it's someone who does not have purchasing power, will have purchasing power, where is their life going to be? Which is why I think it's very important to focus on building that data and conviction through multiple nodes of data of the portfolio you have. So for us, fortunately, we look at all our founding team as one organization. They are serving a common need for different purposes. So that is first-hand, readily available common nodes of information that's coming in. In terms of the gut element, it's super important. We started Huddle with gut instinct. We started Huddle also with the instinct of FOMO, to be very honest, of what we felt we didn't have. But we don't follow the gut of what we believe about a founder. I think it's very important what the founder believes. And I think to the second point, I'll pass it over to Ishaan. And I think it's very hard to pick success stories, because it's a very different definition of success that we like to define for our teams.
Yeah, no, I think sort of following on to what Sanil mentioned, I think we also sort of look at gut and conviction in slightly different ways, right? Of course, like Madhav was also sort of commented earlier that the conviction of the founder is very, very important, but that also needs to be backed by certain sort of softer elements, right? So for us, when we even thinking about conviction or gut behind a specific strategy or a specific sort of direction for a company, we always tend to consider multiple different scenarios, even outside of just pure data, right? So I think why you're making that decision, who you're making that decision for. So for instance, if we're talking about potential category for a product launch that a company needs to sort of get into, right? So there needs to be multiple different reasons as to why you make that decision. And one, of course, can fundamentally be gut and conviction of the team. But at a very early stage, one needs to think about a variety of different sort of software elements which are driven by data. So I think it's hard to think about sort of specific instances, but I think in one of our cases of companies in our portfolio, in the men's wellness sort of space, we at a very early sort of stage had cumulatively as a team sort of decided that we would focus on one particular category and go specifically heavy on that sort of segment, right? And that was going to be the strategy for the business for the foreseeable future, at least for the next 2 quarters. But the founder, having sort of seen the pulse of the business, and really sort of spend time thinking through what's working, what's not working, had this sense that we would need to be able to sort of take the decision to expand into multiple different categories, complementary categories at a very early stage. And even though our initial sort of strategy was slightly different together as a unit. But that conviction sort of led us to dig deeper and find the relevant data sets and understand whether those data sets are making sense for us to take that decision, right? So I think what I'm trying to sort of say is that in a lot of times, it's not just one or the other. It's conviction starts off, the thought process, but which leads to one finding and digging into more sort of data sets to be able to build conviction around that final decision. So I think it's always a combination of the two. But starting off with conviction is in our field of work, I think is a given, and one should always sort of go with their gut.
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense, and I think depending on which stage you are in, and I mean, like it's not a single variable or like a linear equation. So a lot of factors comes into the picture. So I think like one another question, like I'm not really sure the kind of audience that we have, but uh, like for you guys, like are there any 3 or 4 themes that you guys are bullish about, and that could be either based on like whatever conviction that you had built. So like what are some of the industries where do you think that Indian founders can potentially serve a global demand, or even like some themes that you are really bullish and could be big enough for Indian consumers itself?
I think we're looking at a variety of segments, but in order to sort of keep it more contextual to today's sessions, I think we'll focus on the consumer subset and potentially talk about a couple of sort of areas that we're bullish across that theme. So for us at Huddle, we're effectively looking at companies who have a clear reason to be able to define what that consumer will purchase for, right? So intent-based consumption is a large sort of subsect or a theme that we constantly keep looking at. Now that can translate into multiple different subcategories, across food and beverages, across nutraceutical supplies, across wellness as a overarching category. But the broader sort of intent in terms of what we're looking to define as categories are to be able to look at segments wherein there is a strict captive audience in terms of a consumer subset, and for us to be able to target that subset in a very clearly defined manner, right? And I think India is specifically ready for a lot of direct to consumer businesses to really come up and thrive at this current time. So in terms of a distribution and customer acquisition channel, I think we're very bullish on brands taking a D2C first approach while solving for some of these subsectors. Sanil, what do you think?
I think to sort of also just add to that, Ankit, it's we see entering any consumers purchasing, taking a percentage of their purchasing power as part of our teams, whatever our teams are building, by realizing that loyalty has to be built through need. Then building the next in line product or service can be a want, but it then becomes a part of the loyalty that's been built by the overall brand. So first, loyalty has to come because they need that. There's a direct output from the input, whether that output is celebratory reasons or it is refreshment purposes, like building building beverages brands, or serving a economy of cloud kitchens, something what Madhav is doing, who put it has to be serving a need. Your next in line product has got to be anything that marries that consumer's next intent, which you can only find out if you're a part of their ecosystem. I think one of the areas that we're clearly seeing right now is that, with be it due to this pandemic or before it as well, the market in India is very, very large, as we all know. So you can actually build leading organizations within cities. You can there's a the what stays the same is the intent. What is different is the flow of who purchases it, why they're purchasing it, and when they're purchasing it. I think what we've realized is you can keep building micro clusters of growth. So that's where we are.
Yeah, I think that's really great. So I think one quick follow up on that, especially on the D2C side, Ishaan, you mentioned like you are seeing a lot more opportunities. So like on the D2C front, like what do you think? Like, is there an opportunity to build like premium brands or maybe like a mass market brand? So where do you see that shift happening, or maybe like people who are willing to start something in the D2C, like should they go after more of a premium products or for the mass market? So what's your take on that?
I think interestingly, because of just the nature of how D2C is, sort of constructed and what's needed to be able to build brands and businesses out there, um, it allows for flexibility to be able to target either of the two ends of the spectrum, right? So either you go mass or you go premium. I think previously, when businesses need to take, a sort of physical, sort of first offline first sort of orientation, there were a lot of constraints and restrictions around building both category of businesses, and there were costs and resource constraints associated with, each of those spectrums. But the beauty about going direct to consumer is that a lot of those restraints can be maneuvered and figured out, right? So I think as long as a team, as a founder, you're clear about what value you're driving as part of that product or service you're offering, one can reconfigure that offering to be able to tailor it to a variety of different audiences. So what I'm trying to sort of say is here that there is no limitation to either go niche focused towards a slightly more premium segment or to go heavy towards a mass category. One has to have a different outlook, but D2C offers that flexibility to do both. So in our portfolio, we've got companies who are looking at a variety of different sort of segments, right? So we've got heavy mass product segment sort of focus categories, and we've got companies building for more niche premium audiences. But the approach, the go-to-market, all of those sorts of things are flexible and feasible, keeping that in mind.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful to know. So I think I'll pass it over to you. And
Perfect. Yeah. So I know we're sort of hitting close to our end time, but I'll have one last question for both Ankit and Sanil independently. So Ankit, I sort of want to sort of understand a slightly different lens when we talk about consumer demand with you. So we all understand the importance of consumer client servicing, right? And in your field of work, I'm assuming the extent always differs, right? So how do you maneuver the extent of how deeply you engage in servicing a customer when you're defining sort of parameters, for your team to be able to conduct efforts and manage and bandwidth and resources? Where do you sort of set that limit? Where do you sort of say that this is the extent where we will service our customer, and that's the furthest that we can go?
right, yeah. So I think for us, customer support or customer success has been like one of the primary focus area, and especially because I mean it could be because of how we have grown as a company. So we started with serving the enterprises, and like initially we had a handful of customers, and over there the more you talk to them, like more you understand about the market, and more you understand what their pain points are, and like that would solve their problems immediately, like if you are listening, if you have open ears. And secondly, that would also give ideas for your product roadmap as well. So we have been doing that when we were serving enterprises, and over the last few years, like when we went from like enterprises to mid market and the SMB, and now like almost at 100,000 customers. So how do we uh, keep that function running? So even now, like every customer sort of gets response to their emails very quickly. We have a live chat as well, wherein like you get a response within 2 minutes or 5 minutes, like even at the current scale. Now, on top of that, like we feel that this function itself, like learning what people are doing on your platform, like how they're interacting, that sort of help you in defining your roadmap as well, right? So because like I am of the opinion that if you are solving a problem for one customer, and like obviously you have to be smart enough to see like understand if that could be a problem faced by a lot more people. uh, so if you build one feature based on somebody's request, like you would be sure that like within your user base, maybe at least 100 people or 1,000 people will be having a similar pain point as well. So like we keep tracking all of this, and like we do things like maybe uh, putting a feature which is not yet built, and we will just put like a CTA for that, like maybe let's say within the video, let's say putting a button called book a meeting, right? And now people are using it, and like when you open it up, it says it's coming soon, but then we know that how many people are clicking on that versus another feature which is getting lesser clicks, so we can actually prioritize the roadmap as well. So I mean, like when you have crossed a certain threshold, and you have like a plenty of users on the platform, like you can do uh, you have like a lot of data that you can rely upon, and now it's up to you, like how do you make use of that data and taking product decisions, like taking uh, yeah. So I mean, it's really interesting, like when you have like so many people uh, uh, producing like thousands of data points, and then you know that uh, how do you optimize it for their use cases, how do you optimize your product roadmap, how do you optimize for the pricing and so on. We we like love to talk to our users. We have a active Facebook community as well, wherein people share like how they are using our platform and so on. So and that becomes inspiration for other people as well. So yeah.
Got it. No, I absolutely resonate with the aspect that you mentioned, that to use customer servicing and the kind of data that can come out of that to be able to build better solutions for that customer. Absolutely. So I guess last question, for you, Sanil, to sort of wrap up the session. You sort of deal with businesses at a variety of different stages within the early stage sort of ecosystem, right? So, at what stage do you believe that data measurement and analysis becomes important in understanding dynamics? Is there a particular stage that founders should start looking at data, or should it be a constant activity? What are your thoughts there?
I think data analysis needs to start one where you have this the second you get your first customer, the so you start analyze the customer you have, you analyze the customer you've lost, you analyze the customer that you want and you can't get, and then you analyze the commonality between what is taking place in your business that you fundamentally can't change because it's the spine of your organization, and you marry that algorithm into realizing that your true value then is not only the spine of the business but why someone is saying yes to you, and that critical mass has to be multiplied with the serviceable audience you have, which brings us to the point that we said, are you catering to a fear or are you catering to someone's fear of missing out? And if then the answer comes that it is fear, you've just hit yourself a business that is going to have critical mass, because the lifetime value is going to be until and unless your product hits their requirement or their purpose. So the last point is this has to be a continuous process, much like breathing. If you're not studying your data day in and day out, however cumbersome it is, it's you whether you have to get resources only for data, or every person in the team has to study data. I think this is the maths to it.
No, absolutely. I think in the spirit of singularity, I think we should take that as a key takeaway for everyone to sort of apply, right? That regardless of the stage that you're in, one has to keep a keen eye on data sets, no matter what they mean to an organization at any sort of stage. So great. I think this has been a very enriching session. Thank you, Ankit. Thank you, Sanil, for sharing your insights and sort of being a part of Singularity University's initiatives. We'd love to sort of hear from the viewers as well, if there are any particular areas that they've been able to sort of combat better, or deal with, to be able to identify consumer demand and challenges across the ecosystem, and more importantly, if any hacks you've been able to sort of come up with to be able to deal better with that audience. We'd love to hear from you, and look forward to our next sessions from here on as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.